Been nearly 2 years since I went with my dad to the Lordstown, Ohio General Motors plant. They make the Chevy Cruze in that plant. The place was amazing. I remember going with my dad when I was 12. And at that point, the plant was packed. Say that 3 times fast. The plant was packed with employees running all over the place, working on the stuff of making cars. But this time, 2 years ago, very few people in the plant. And most of them were watching lots of machines do all kinds of work, much, much more quickly, by the way, than I remember the humans doing the work when I was 12. Well, on Monday, it was announced that that plant, that same Lordstown, Ohio plant, and many others are going to be closing, from lots of workers down to only a few to none. Live from the 3-room apartment above Uncle Jack's garage, only for 1 more month, by the way, until we move to the new basement. Hey there, Stackers. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter. Welcome to Money in the Morning, the show where we take not one, but 2 headlines ripped from the financial press, and we turn that into a podcast. Not only do we read it like some people do, but we take those headlines and we actually tell you what those might mean to your wallet. And then, as if that's not enough, we put them together into something we call the big idea for you to take along with you on your day. Money in the Morning is brought to you by Hurdler. Whether you're somebody just starting off with your side hustle or you're an experienced entrepreneur, Hurdler automatically tracks all your mileage, expenses, income streams, and tax deductions in real time. Listen to this. On average, people find over $5,600 in tax deductions. How do you get some of that goodness? Head to stackingbenjamins.com/Hurdler. That's HURDLR. And you can not only kick the tires on the free product, but also on the premium product for a month for no fee. stackingbenjamins.com/Hurdler for more. All right. We talked about Hurdler. We talked about the GM plant. Got a lot more on today's show. So why don't we get this party started? Laura, why don't you kick things off for us?
Here are today's Money in the Morning headlines. Ready, set, go.
The way she says go doesn't make me feel like I have to go like right now. You know, it's not like the ready, set, go, like when you're in elementary school and you're running the sack race against the other 5th grade team. That was some serious competition. But she says ready, set, go, and it's more like ready, set, when you're ready, let's get this thing started. Probably. But we might as well start right now. This piece comes to us from USA Today and probably every single publication in America. This is written by Nathan Bomey over at USA Today. GM poised to close plants in Michigan, Ohio, Maryland. Will cut 15% of salaried workers. I think it's also cutting one in Ontario, is my understanding. GM closing quite a few plants. General Motors, this piece says, is poised to end production at 5 plants in the U.S. and Canada, kill off several passenger cars, including the Chevrolet Impala, and slash 15% of its salaried workforce in a sweeping cost-cutting plan designed to boost profits and adjust to America's changing taste in vehicles. The Detroit-based automaker said it will end production by the end of 2019 at its Lordstown assembly plant in Northeast Ohio, its Detroit Hamtramck assembly plant in Southeast Michigan, its Oshawa assembly plant in Ontario, there it is, its Baltimore operations parts plant in Maryland, and its Warren transmission operations plant in Southeast Michigan. The move reflects the stark consumer shift to SUVs, crossovers, and pickups. All the GM plants on the chopping block make passenger cars. The company will also discontinue the Chevrolet Cruze and Volt in North America, as well as the Buick LaCrosse, the Cadillac XTS, and the Cadillac CT6. While sales of these models were suffering, they continue to support thousands of jobs. GM has about 1,500 employees at the Detroit plant. 1,600 at the Lordstown factory and 2,500 in Oshawa. About half of these workers will be given the chance to relocate to another GM operation, the company said. The announcement comes ahead of next year's contract talks with the UAW, the United Auto Workers Union, which could potentially lead to decisions to devote vehicles to those facilities. The union vowed to fight the plan, but there's a serious chance that the plants will close for good. CEO Mary Barra is seeking to reposition GM for a future defined by self-driving cars, ride-sharing networks, and electric vehicles. The cuts will make GM, quote, lean and agile as the company aims to lead in autonomous and lead in electric vehicles, Barra said. The political backlash, how about that one, against GM was swift and intense. President Donald Trump said he was, quote, very tough on Barra in a one-on-one conversation about the decision. Quote, this country has done a lot for General Motors, Trump said as he departed the White House for a series of campaign events in Mississippi. They better get back to Ohio, and soon we have a lot of pressure on them. Meanwhile, fans of fuel-efficient vehicles were dismayed at the loss of several smaller cars in the semi-electric Volt. The automaker trumpeted Volt. Man, I can't talk today, can I? Let's do that again. The automaker trumpeted the Volt for years as a symbol for its alternative propulsion expertise, but the company has since pivoted toward building fully battery-powered cars such as the Chevy Bolt. The Volt, whose production model debuted about 10 years ago, still had a small gas engine paired with its battery pack. Like the Volt, the Cruze was also described for years as an illustration to GM's recovery after its federal bailout and bankruptcy. GM's decision to locate Cruze production in Ohio breathed new life into the Lordstown plant and was hailed by President Barack Obama's administration as a reflective of the auto industry's revival. GM isn't getting rid of all of its passenger cars. It's keeping models such as the Chevy Malibu, Chevy Bolt, Cadillac CTS, and the Buick Regal. GM deserves credit for, quote, taking bold action, but risks losing in the long run if consumers rediscover passenger cars, said Mike Ramsey, a transportation and mobility analyst for Gartner. There's no guarantee that it's going to stay SUV. Ramsey said there may be a big return to sedans, so it could be problematic for them. Taken together, the moves will deliver more than $6 billion in additional annual cash flow by the end of 2020, GM said. That includes $4 billion in cost cuts and $1.5 billion in reduced capital expenditures. The UAW said it would confront this decision by GM through every legal, contractual, and collective bargaining avenue open to our membership. It's a callous decision to cut American operations about 10 years after the automaker first accepted federal bailout money, UAW GM official Terry Deitis said in a statement. GM's production decisions in light of employee concessions during the economic downturn and a taxpayer bailout from bankruptcy puts profits before the working families of this country whose personal sacrifices stood with GM during those dark days, Deitis said. These decisions are a slap in the face to the memory and recall of that historical American-made bailout. GM said it would close 2 additional plants outside of North America by the end of 2019. It will also continue with plans to close its plants in Gunsan, South Korea. The workforce reduction will affect 15% of the company's salaried and salaried contract workforce. It's not clear how many of those cuts will be voluntary and how many will be in the form of layoffs. GM offered buyouts to 18,000 workers several weeks ago. GM has 54,000 salaried workers in North America, meaning the company is going to cut about 8,000 of those positions, GM spokesman Pat Morrissey said. While Morrissey declined to specify how many workers agreed to take the buyout offer, he said, quote, we did not get all 8,000 of that reduction through voluntary buyouts. GM's expected to do involuntary cuts sometime in January, he said. The company said it will also have 25% fewer executives. Big news out of General Motors, and there's a lot to go over here. But one thing I read in another piece leading up to this was that General Motors has had about 9 months of negative cash flow, which led to this. And Mary Barra went on record saying that they were going to have to do something about the negative cash flow concern and do it quickly. This is interesting in a couple ways. Number one, when you have negative cash flow, and I love treating our personal financial picture as if we're a business, don't you? It just makes a ton of sense to me. When you look at yourself as if you're a business, you're going to make non-emotional decisions about your money. And too many people too often Just do the emotional thing. They do what feels good. I remember reading somebody's blog post before saying, I know I should pay off this bill, but I'm paying off this one because I'm sick of it. And even though it has a lower interest rate and lower payment, I'm just sick of it. I want to pay it off. Fine. But if you were in business, you wouldn't do that. And if you thought of your personal situation in a business, you also wouldn't do that. Because you do it not just as a detriment to the shareholders, but a detriment to everybody. The frustrating thing, and I don't want to get into the union, non-union thing, because I personally don't think that unions are the enemy. But in this case, reading this piece, I think that the union head fails to understand that if General Motors doesn't have its act together, nobody's got a job, right? Now, that doesn't mean that General Motors needs to ignore their workers and that they should put profits ahead of the worker, like this piece says. But if there's negative cash flow for 6 months and you don't get that together, nobody is going to have a job. And it doesn't matter that the company was bailed out or not. And listen, if you get a second chance, I mean, you look at people like Dave in Tennessee, right? The big Dave, Mr. Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey had a second shot to get it right after making some horrible moves around real estate. Look at what he did with it. For General Motors to not do the right thing and make sure that they have their act together for the rest of the workers, I think that's tough. I think it's a tough decision. I think they did make the tough call. And I think that sometimes you've got to do it. Let's get away from General Motors for a second, whether you agree or disagree with what GM did. Sometimes you've got to make the tough call and you've got to know where the ball's headed. And I think that's an important thing. Now, let's get to the workers who are going to lose their jobs. I've had lots of discussions. We're going to call them discussions to be nice. But in a lot of cases, as you know, they weren't necessarily that nice. People vehemently disagreed with me when I said you need to have a good cash reserve. And I know plenty of people who say cash reserves are baloney, Joe. If you've got credit and you've got credit resources, why wouldn't you stay 100% invested? Here's why. Because if you lose your job and you don't have a cash reserve and the market goes down like it has been, you're in a spot where you have to sell assets that have depreciated in value, or you have to go into debt. And let's say that you go through all that credit. Now you've got a bunch of debt that you can't pay back. And you can't get more. Imagine filling out that application for credit. Hey, Joe, tell me a little bit about your job. My job's gone. I don't have one. Now I can't get more credit. And even along the way, how are you going to pay those bills? So I think it is incredibly frustrating to me to hear people say in a very short-sighted manner as the market continued to go up, don't have a cash reserve. A lot of GM people I'm hoping have a cash reserve. I think that's a big lesson here. Let's say hello to our friends on Facebook. We do this live in front of a Facebook audience as we do these. And by the way, if you want to hang out with us when we do these shows live, head to facebook.com/iStackBenjamins. And we rarely say when we're going to do these live because the production schedule's been so messed up lately. But I'll tell you, today we did. We told people about 40 minutes ahead of time. 40 minutes. We gave you tons of notice that we were coming on. But seriously, if you're hanging on Facebook one day, maybe you can catch one of our shows live and be a part of the audience. And actually, not even the audience should be part of the show because we've got Kimberly here, Kevin's here, Eric is here. We were fighting the sun coming in the window of the 3-room apartment, and Eric said, "We know you're not in Detroit yet. There's no sun here." I have thought before, Eric, that the sun shines a lot more here in Texarkana than it does in Detroit. Sun shines a fair amount of time in Detroit, but not like it does here. Julianne is here. Jacob is here, says happy afternoon morning. We're recording this in the afternoon for Money in the Morning. Nydia teaching me how to pronounce her name today. Shireen is here. I didn't know if it was Shireen or Paul, but she said that the best face is here, so that has to be Shireen. Evan is here. Evan says, no, not the Volt. Say goodbye to the Volt, Evan. You got another year to buy it. And you know what's cool? It's a collector's item. So there you go there. Otherwise, you got to buy the Bolt now. Eric said these huge manufacturers have to bet big on future unknowns. So much of the auto market depends upon future gas prices and the viability and safety of self-driving technologies. Well, and I think that's interesting, Eric, because we know that self-driving cars are on the way. And based on all the work that they've done so far, not just there, but also General Motors, kind of a leadership position, right? In the ride sharing stuff. I mean, they've really, with services like Maven, have really stepped up their game on a lot of the ride sharing technology as well. So General Motors flexing to focus on those things, and then also looking at the current trend of SUVs. I kind of agree with the guy in the piece, don't you? Betting money on SUVs over sedans, I get it short term. I also know that that's where your bread is buttered. Having lived in Detroit for a number of years and talking to a lot of executives, I know that their ability to make a profit on SUVs way, way, way bigger. So taking advantage of that can really add money to the coffers and make sure that the company's viable for a long period of time. But betting on that now, especially with all of the news lately on a lot of stuff. I guess if you look at one piece of news, and that's that oil is at all-time lows, you can see that for at least the short term, you're probably going to see gas prices stay pretty low. So maybe 6 months. I bet they're betting for 2 years that you'll keep oil prices low. I paid $1.99, by the way, yesterday in Missouri. Way to go, Missouri, on $1.99 gas. I haven't seen $1.99 on gas in forever. Kevin says, given that Ford is focusing on production in the more profitable truck and SUV market, it might make sense for GM to try to steal market share in the passenger car market. I would think so, but they've got the numbers, Kevin, and they've made a lot of great moves lately. So, yeah, I don't know. Looks like it's going to be a case of follow the leader here. Nydia, how about that, Nydia? Nydia says, so few American brand sedans left with similar move from Ford and Chrysler. Nobody's making them anymore. Own a sedan, own a car. You'll have, talk about collector's item. There you've got it. Ron says, so much for tax savings. Well, those tax breaks on those electric cars are going bye-bye anyway. So, Ron, yeah, you're not getting those. In fact, they said that's part of why they're lowering the number of those that they're making, is because as the tax break go away, they think that fewer people are going to buy them. So between the Bolt and the Volt, decide to get rid of the one that has a little engine in it and go with the purebred there. Susan's here, Kevin's here, and Evan's here. Evan says to buy it used. Absolutely. Buy the car used. Let somebody else buy the GM car. buy your car used. I totally agree with that. By the way, Shireen says California's at $3.64, and we're happy it's down from $3.64, and I paid $1.99 yesterday. Wow. That's a big tax difference on gas, which, by the way, I believe is 90 to 95% of the difference isn't distribution. It's just the gas tax from state to state is my understanding of why gas prices are so different. So yay, California, making a bunch of money off of Shireen. Let's move on to our second piece, which is a piece about American Airlines. And I think our big takeaway there is cash reserves, a lot better than rolling dice on credit. Don't get rid of your cash reserve. Please don't. Keep your cash reserve. And I kind of like, we were having this discussion elsewhere earlier today. Somebody said that they really like my friend Paula Pant's idea about putting money in your Roth IRA to make the contribution, leaving that in cash, and then have that be your cash reserve. I'll tell you, I like that and I don't like it. Here's what I don't like about it. If you have to use that cash reserve, there's no mechanism to allow you to put it back in. Like, with a 401k loan, you can borrow it. And by the way, I'm not saying take out a 401k loan. Ugly. Rather have you take money out of the Roth than that. But, 401k loan has a mechanism where you can put the money back. Roth IRA doesn't have that mechanism. So when you take money out of the Roth IRA, it's gone. And I really like the Roth as a tax diversification piece in your later years. So as you're taking money out of your pre-tax, whether it's a 401k, 403b, a simple, whatever that is, I like the Roth as a tax-free bucket to kind of go side by side with that. So we can kind of play with tax brackets. If I use my cash reserve that way, I get rid of the ability to do that. So if you can't afford to do both, have an emergency fund and do a Roth, put your emergency fund inside a Roth and pray that nothing happens. And I think that's a great hybrid in that case. But if you can afford to do both, leave it outside. Kevin just said you've got 60 days to replace the Roth distribution. I agree with that. But how many times when you got in this situation where you needed the money, were you going to be able to put it back in 60 days? That's a tough go. I like just leaving it outside if possible. All right, let's move on to American Airlines, shall we? I'm a big fan of American Airlines, as people who read my Twitter feed know. I say that incredibly tongue-in-cheek because American Airlines and I have been through just some absolute stupidity. By the way, nice people who work at American Airlines, great people, phenomenal people, very helpful. Who can't help me with their dumb policies? The people on the front lines, not the problem here. Whoever the bean counter is who comes up with some of this moronic stuff, just amazing. Let's go into it. This comes to us from Inc. It is written by Bill Murphy. American Airlines just took a massive survey of 41,858 employees. The results leaked, and they're astonishing. American Airlines has developed a reputation for a lot of things, but how's this for a surprising one? Transparency. Because for the second year in a row, the airline has solicited feedback from employees and then released the results to its workers. This year, 41,858 employees apparently responded to the survey, which is actually down from the 59,197 who responded last year. You can imagine this is a dangerous and potentially embarrassing thing for the airline, given that its employees just protested against their own airline in 15 cities and are in the middle of a big lawsuit with it and have spoken out about its policies as unacceptable, ridiculous, and inhumane. And yet, after conducting the American Voice survey in October, the airline recently released some of its results to its workers. Of course, it all promptly leaked, first to the airline site, The Forward Cabin. To its credit, the airline organized the results by highlighting both the 3 most favorable questions based on employee response and the 3 least favorable questions. Here are the key findings. We'll start with the least favorable ones, in part because they make the favorable ones a bit more remarkable. All 3 unfavorables have to do with an apparent disconnect between the leadership at the top and the employees actually running the airline. 1, leaders at American make the right decision to take care of our frontline team members. Favorable, 26%. Neutral, 22%. Unfavorable, 51%. By the way, I'm getting rid of the stuff behind the decimal. 51% say unfavorable. Leaders in America make the right decision to take care of our frontline team members. 51% unfavorable. Number 2, leaders in America make the right decisions that support me. Favorable, 27%. Neutral, 22%. Unfavorable, 49%. Ouch. Number 3, leaders in America listen and seek to understand the frontline team member experience. Favorable, 28%. Neutral, 22%. Unfavorable, 49. I'll give you the decimal point here, 0.9. Pretty much 50%. Overall, you wind up with a picture of unsatisfied employees who feel like their senior management neither understands nor even cares about supporting them. By the way, I've seen that in action, where I feel like the person that I'm talking to realizes that they're screwed, just totally screwed. Like they're looking at me with this look like, I can't do anything about it, sir. You're running up against a brick wall. I agree with you. They can't tell me they agree with me, but they just kind of nod their head. There was a woman one time that said, I will lose my job if I let you on this airplane. Sir, I can't do anything about it. I will lose my job. Airplane's half full. Going right now. I got to wait 2 hours for the airplane to go where it's going and come back to get me. 2 hours. Can't let me on. And the whole operation is designed to make sure I reach the place where I'm going on my ticket. And I can't get you there quickly. I have to make you go slow. Either that or rob you of a little money in your wallet. And I know it's not robbery. And I know my ticket says that I'm on a certain plane. But do they really care how soon I get home? I don't think so. So, against that, the favorables here, though, are truly remarkable. Number 1, I see myself working American Airlines for the foreseeable future. Favorable, 79%. Neutral, 14. Unfavorable, 6. 2, I have meaningful relationships at work. Favorable, 74%. Neutral, 17. Unfavorable, 8. 3, my manager acts in an honest and ethical manner. Favorable, 73. Neutral, 18. Unfavorable, 8. Of course, airlines operate largely on seniority, so it makes sense employees would have a high pain threshold here, especially on the question of whether they plan to stick with American despite their complaints. But there's also some good news in here, to my mind, suggesting that there's a real positive foundation to build on if senior management could only figure out how having meaningful relationships at work and trusting your immediate manager to be honest and ethical are crucial signs of employee well-being and happiness. It suggests maybe there is a positive culture at American Airlines, or at least the potential to build one, but it's being buried by the conflicts between senior management and the frontline employees. It's a giant challenge, but it's not insurmountable. What to do with the data? Some other commentators are suggesting American Airlines solicits their employees' opinions, but then doesn't do anything with the information. But as Louis Lazar of Chicago Business Journal pointed out a month or so ago, there are developments in 2018 that seem like they came as a direct result of the 2017 American Voice survey. For example, the airline reported last year that a whopping 55% of employees reporting that they didn't have a clear understanding of American's goals and objectives. But now, American Airlines has a weekly podcast called Tell Me Why, in which senior executives are interviewed about big decisions. And CEO Doug Parker and airline president Robert Isom reportedly were on track to do 38 meetings with employees during 2018. Is it enough? Fair question, of course, and it's also worth noting that improving communication is a more discrete goal to tackle than making better decisions, which is what the unfavorables this year are all about. But whether you love American Airlines or loathe it, it's the biggest U.S. carrier, and we're probably stuck with it. Even if you're crammed into a 737 MAX, it's a good thing if the employees are happy, because that will absolutely affect your experience. I think you could take that back to the General Motors piece. You know, to some degree, General Motors has to work with the union to make sure that the people putting the cars together are happy. People putting cars together are happy. You end up with a much better vehicle. You end up with a vehicle that seems like people cared about putting it together. So they're in it together. The thing that's interesting about this to me is something that we can all learn. I spend a bunch of time in financial forums online, more so than frankly I really want to. And I've gotten tired of it lately. And I've gotten tired because the number of people talking, and by the way, talking and saying stupid stuff, just absolutely stupid stuff, is amazing. I'm sure somebody's listening to this right now going, this is kind of stupid, Joe. Okay, fair point. But just irresponsible, stupid stuff. And it's funny because I think in a lot of these cases, if we quit talking for a second and we just start listening, maybe things don't get better right away. But I think there's a lot there out for us to understand. And I've realized over the course of 2018 that there were times when I was go, 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 go. And my creativity and innovation during those points were very, very low. But my creativity, my innovation, and my ability to get rid of problems in the processes, not just in work, but also in my daily life, much, much bigger when I was quiet and I had the time to listen. And I hope that's what you're seeing here with American Airlines. Listening beats talking 99.9% of the time. It's incredible. Man, I hope this is a good sign for American Airlines, because I get so frustrated with how little the airlines seem to listen. It seems like, and I understand that's a tough business to be in, and I've seen some of the financial stuff, and I get it. I understand why Spirit Airlines, who I refuse to ever fly again, just nickel and dimes everything. Totally nickel and dimes everything. But so I get it. I just don't like it. I think somebody's going to come along and blow that up, don't you? Like it's going to get much better. So good stuff there. Nydia says Erie is similar results at my government job survey. Oh, that's interesting. That's incredibly the government. There's somebody else. There's another institution that might have some listening issues. All right. That's going to do it for today. We are on to this thing called the big idea, where we take both these headlines. How are we going to put together a positive survey from American Airlines and a negative development from General Motors? We're going to put these together into one big idea. We'll have that in just a second. But if you're somebody who's ever thought about becoming an entrepreneur, or somebody who is an ongoing entrepreneur like I am, check out Hurdler. And I got to tell you, when I started using Hurdler, it became so much easier for me to track my expenses and track my mileage. It was amazing. The average person who uses Hurdler, by the way, saves just an absolute ton of money, $5,600 in tax deductions. The way that it works is you get to know your profit before and after tax. So you know how much money you're bringing in. But if you're an independent contractor and you've never been one before, guess what? You're responsible for all your withholding, the thing that your boss has always done for you when you work for somebody else. You know exactly how much to withhold for taxes. You take a look at your expenses on the job and you know exactly what your profit is, which is the number one thing you need to know. It's built for self-employed entrepreneurs for you. So whether you're a freelancer, a realtor, a host, a driver, a courier, whatever it might be, Hurdler's got you covered. A podcaster. Hurdler auto track mileage, maximize your profits. You just turn it on and it will track your mileage for you, so you don't have to write it down in a book like I've had to do all these years. Track every expense, claim every deduction. It's all there. And with our link, what do you get? Well, you get the basics if you use just the regular Hurdler product, but I'll tell you what, you're going to want the premium. And if you do that, you get to kick the tires on it using our link, stackingbenjamins.com/Hurdler. That's Hurdlr. Just take out that last E, and you've got Hurdler right there. Before we get to the big idea, Eric is here and says, it's so great when leaders listen, are willing to actually learn and change, builds trust and morale. It totally does. It completely does. And it doesn't mean, by the way, that the leader has to always agree. I think leaders are afraid to listen because they think they have to agree with what the employee tells them. I think just having empathy and knowing that your boss hears you is a big part of winning, whether they end up moving on it or not. I think it's absolutely huge. So how do we put these two things together? How do we put together on one side, General Motors closing a bunch of plants, and our lesson there being cash reserves being better than rolling the dice on credit if you're somebody losing your job. American Airlines surveying its people and finding out that, you know what? American Airlines listening to their employees. The big lesson, I think, is this. And I love Jack Welch. Absolutely love. Jack Welch was a guy who ran General Electric for a number of years. Jack Welch and his wife have had a podcast that you can listen to. Not remembering the name off the top of my head. Jack has had some fantastic books, just the history of General Electric when he ran it. Once again, very controversial. They called him Neutron Jack. Didn't always make the popular decision, but Jack made the crucial decisions when he needed to. And with your financial picture, if you're staying on top of it like you should, I love this phrase, and I'm not going to get this quote exactly right, but Jack said something like this: face reality as it is, not as you wish it were or hope it could be. I think too much of the time, a company like General Motors could say, well, I hope cars are going to come back. Well, I hope that we can keep all these people employed. Well, I hope we can continue. But after 9 months of negative cash flow, they said, nope, we got to make a change. And did they make a little change? No, they made a huge change. They made a decisive change about what they were going to do. Good job, GM. Whether it ends up being great or not, you got to make the decisive move. And by the same token, American Airlines, their employees are telling them they don't like the way the airline's being run. So 39 meetings around the country to talk about decisions. Also a podcast to talk about how decisions are actually made so that people get more of the factors and the criteria. At the very least, fantastic first step. Face reality as it is, not as you wish it were or you hope it could be. That's going to do it for today, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you're live here on Facebook or at home listening, thanks to everybody who left us a review on iTunes, Apple Podcast, by the way, not iTunes, Apple Podcast, on Stitcher, wherever you may listen. Go Stack some Benjamins. We'll see you next time back here on Money in the Morning.
Money in the Morning is created by Saul-Sehy and comes to your ears because of the collective genius of our producer, Rutter-Reese, engineer, Caden Thompson, and a pack of very well-trained ferrets here in the basement. You'll find links to all of our headlines featured on today's show in Joe's Twitter feed at @AverageJoeMoney. I know you already know this too, but Money in the Morning is for entertainment purposes only, and you shouldn't act on anything recommended by a bunch of entertainers in a basement without first consulting with your financial advisor and second, having your head examined. Have a headline you'd like us to discuss? Send them to joe@stackingbenjamins.com or put them on our Stacking Benjamins Basement closed Facebook group. This show is copyright 2018 Stacking Benjamins LLC, all rights reserved. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor Doug, and I reserve the right to always say, we'll see you next time back here on Money in the Morning.